Hello, everyone. We have another interview today. Get to share another story of chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME, CFS. We have Jim here with us today. Hey, Jim, how you doing?
Hey, Raelan, doing well today. It's a good day.
Thank you so much for doing this and chatting with me today. Make everybody jealous and tell everybody where you are in the world.
All right. So I live in Honolulu, Hawaii. I live right in the middle of the big city of Honolulu on Punch Bowl.
I was looking forward to chatting with you today for a lot of reasons, but one of them, I was trying to just use my powers of visualization. Like, ooh, I'm interviewing Jim in Hawaii today. I'm pretending that I'm going there, that I'm sitting with you in your living room and we're having a chat, and there's all that awesomeness outside my window too.
Oh, nice. Well, awesome. Nice to see you in the flesh, sort of.
Yeah, you too, sort of. Oh, no, I really appreciate you doing this. I know it's not everybody's favorite thing to put videos of themselves out into the world and sacrifice time on their Sunday. So thank you.
This will be the first exposure to the big wide beyond, I guess. So it'll be
Ooh.
interesting. I know.
So
Good
how's
timing.
life in Hawaii today?
It's well, it's kind of a overcast day, so it's not all that great. So this is life in the big city of Honolulu. Um, it's a real hazy day, so I'm trying to see what you can see down there. But
Uh,
that's the South Shore looking towards a neighborhood called Kaka'ako, and we're up here on Punch Bowl. Ward Avenue is pretty much straight down. So that big dome in the middle is the Blaisdell Concert Hall. Waikiki
okay.
is that way a couple of miles. The airport's that way a couple of miles. And this is kind of a weird weather day. We've had blue skies and just beautiful weather for the last, I don't know, stop counting days and weeks. Um, Had a little bit of rain, just that kind of comes and goes. So it's pretty nice. Can't no complaints. We got out on a hike last night, and right behind us on the mountains here, there are some trails. We hopped up there, and it was nice. It had rained like the day before, so the trail was a little muddy up in the mountain, but beautiful. And we were up there for the sun. We didn't see the sunset. We were up there at that time of the day, and it was gorgeous. T-shirt and shorts weather. So
That
not
sounds
to rub it in, but
amazing.
that's kind of the day to day. We're sort of jonesing for some seasonal weather, actually. And this sort of passes for it because it's a little bit cooler wind and but still 80 degrees, 85 degrees, something like that.
Oh
It's
my
warm.
goodness.
You visited
That's
Hawaii
amazing.
before, or you have never been?
I I have. I've
Forget.
been to Maui. Yeah, and
Oh,
then
okay.
once
That's
I
right.
went when I was a kid, but I was in Maui, oh my goodness, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. It was a long time ago. It's still one of my top places in the world when people ask, "Oh, what are the favorite places that you've been?" Which I don't know what you find, but I always find that such a hard question to ask because it's hard to compare places because they're so different. But if I'm forced to
Yeah.
pick, Maui comes up in my top two just because it was ridiculously stunning.
But it's, yeah, we like it.
How long have you been
Yeah.
out there?
Since 1993. So I moved out.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I've lived here longer than any other place, but I grew up, born and raised in California.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, Southern California kid. Grew up in Irvine, California.
Okay.
Went to school at UC Santa Barbara. Then I
Wow.
went and lived abroad for a couple of years. So in China and Taiwan, and then made my way back here. So
Amazing.
yeah, I didn't come here necessarily for the surf. That was just gravy because that was something I've done since I was a kid. You know, from the inflatable mats to boogie boards to surfing. And
Okay.
I dragged a board with me all through China and Taiwan as well. Went hunting for waves in Hainan Island, and so it was a big part of my identity for a very long time, and it's still something that's probably one of the things that is my strongest anchor for recovering is getting back in the lineup. It's part of my mantra: get your ass back in the lineup as soon as you can. And Angie, my wife, surfs, and she's surfing on our behalf these days. So that's which I'm now able to go down to the beach and hang out when she surfs. But and a few times I've been tempted to paddle out, but I'm not ready to deal with the consequences if I do that. So hopefully in the coming months, I don't know, we'll see how that goes. As much as we kick and scream, and even COVID compounded with, the condition, whatever this is, ME/CFS, is, I still maintain that my complaints are recreational. I still have a lot of positive things happening, and more blessed than not. So, and absolutely convinced I'll get through this. We've talked about that, the blessing in disguise, having these chronic or this kind of a condition, whatever it is, that sort of points to the things in life that were out of balance. And it's an opportunity to course correct. And I desperately needed that for sure, the way I was burning. So I was just curious before we get started too, is did you just start learning how to do all this, doing the videos and the website and everything, kind of as an outcome of wanting to get your message out, or did you have background in this? Because it's very impressive what you've done. It's pretty extraordinary body of work that you put together already. So
I appreciate that. Thanks. It doesn't feel super impressive on my end, but it's just been growing, and it's been such an insane learning curve. I have had to learn so much, and I've watched so many YouTube videos myself, just trying to learn how to do all these different things. But it basically just started when I could see that I was just about recovered. I'm like, I feel like I have a story to tell. I couldn't believe I was finally getting past this. So I decided on the book. That was like, I'm going to write a book. And then everything just kind of grew from there, because once I got the book out, I came to realize that, that's not enough, and no one's going to know about the book, because there's a bazillion people putting books out every year, and they just get lost in the mountain of them. So I'm like, okay, I need to do some more things if I want people to actually hear this. So I just been building on it. I'm like, okay, I'll start with Instagram. That's my comfort zone. And, I'm like, okay, maybe I'll start a Facebook page. And YouTube was the scary one. I put that one off for a long time.
Is that more from from the technical, daunting from a technical aspect, or was it more just that's more exposure? Or
I think it's the exposure. There's something that felt very vulnerable of just creating a channel and putting it out there. And I'd never been on the internet before, and I had this idea that people on the internet were really mean, and I thought that people were going to attack me, and it's one thing. It's easy to write and put it out there, but it's another thing to actually speak into a camera and tell your story. So, and honestly, the first few months I was doing this channel, I pretty much hated every second of it. Honestly, it was so uncomfortable for me. Like, I put up a video and the anxiety was insane. It's just nuts. It was just but it's been such a growth experience for me doing this that I'm so glad that I've done it, because now I'm so much more comfortable, and I just have had, out of necessity, to build up so many more skills with dealing with that anxiety, and taking feedback in stride, and not letting the mean people get to you, and I just had this faith that if I kept doing it, I'd one day not hate it. And now I'm super relaxed about it now, and I still get a little bit nervous sometimes, but for the most part, anyways,
there's
long answer.
No, that's a really good answer. I was just wondering, so just being a small little bit of the content on your YouTube channel, when you had invited me to do it, my first thought was exposure, and what I do for a living is I'm not uncomfortable in crowds. I do a lot of public speaking, public meetings, tons of meetings, whether they're hearings before decision makers or out in the community. And I used to get really nervous about it when I was first starting out, but I don't anymore. So it wasn't from that aspect, but I was thinking kind of maybe where that anxiety comes from, the exposure. Do I really want to be, popped out there in the big wide world again? But there's a certain part of doing it even now that feels, it feels sort of freeing in a way, even though it wasn't the dynamic of, it's not like I didn't, it feels like the freedom or the liberation is coming not from, how do I put this? It's not from the worry about doing this interview and putting it out there, but it seems more like, man, maybe I have been really sheltering the condition from, my friends and family all know and everything. there certainly has been a bit of sheltering. I mean, my work knows, everybody that I deal with professionally, not everybody, but most people that I deal with professionally know that I'm dealing with this health issue. But there was something that seemed to be very, I don't know, healing and liberating about saying, all right, I'm going to do this and just throw something out there, even if I'm not healed yet. You know, it's it feels like a positive thing to do, and it's a way to just let go of maybe some of the subconscious, you know, fear of not knowing what's going on. It's like, yeah, I don't know what's going on, but trying to figure it out little bit by bit. This is one way to help that happen. The other videos that you've done have been a tremendous reference and resource for me. So everybody that's contributed to those, I've, you know, been stealing these, you know, or I shouldn't say stealing, borrowing, sharing, just absorbing these other experiences and good advice to, you know, to my benefit on a day-to-day basis of healing. So anyways, that's a long-winded thought on that, but I can, anyways, I just am really impressed with what you put out there. So an overcoming, wouldn't know it at all that you dealt with the anxiety. So overcoming that is pretty awesome also in its own right. So good for you.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. And what you said makes a lot of sense, and all of that sounds like things that I could have said too. It's been very much the same for me. You know, for years and years and years, I didn't want anyone to know that I had this illness, and I didn't want it associated with me. So I think that was the other part of it, not just the public exposure and the vulnerability, but like I went from one extreme of like, I don't want anyone to know, I don't want this associated with my identity, to like, hi, I'm chronic fatigue syndrome girl. You know, it's just like, is this who I want to become in life? But I've realized that doesn't mean that's who you become in life. It's just one piece of it. And people say all the time, people are so nice, like, thank you for doing this. It's so amazing. I really appreciate it. It's just so good of you. And I always feel a bit guilty because, I mean, humans are kind of selfish creatures. So I think a lot of what we do is for selfish motives. And I really do. It sounds like a cliche, but I get so much out of it. And pretty much exactly like you just said, every person I interview, I learn so much from. I take at least one solid thing away that I implement in my life, and it makes me better somehow. And it forces me to keep researching and learning because I want to keep putting out information. So it keeps me on top of things. So yeah, it's been good. It's turned out it was worth all the anxiety in those first few months of just wanting to crawl into a ball in the closet, like, I want to quit.
Yeah, and it makes you stronger. You say you learn the tools to overcome it.
Yeah, exactly. It's been an amazing growth experience. So I'm glad it sounds like for you it's starting to be a good thing, a healthy thing to start talking about it more. And yeah, so the reason, I mean, you and I have been chatting for quite a long time now, quite a few months. I'm not even sure how long exactly, but the reason we thought, or I don't even, probably it was my idea to do this chat, is because you know, you're a ways into your recovery journey, but you're not fully recovered yet. But I really like putting stories out. It seems, what am I trying to say here? Everyone has something to offer on their journey. Of course, full recovery stories are super helpful, and we want to see the people that have fully gotten past this, but there is a lot to be learned from the people that are still on the journey too. And I suspect most of the people watching these videos are still on their journey. So it's very relatable to see people who are still in it. And I wouldn't want to miss out on all the amazing things that, you know, people out there have to contribute or to share from their own experience just because they're not at the finish line yet. So I know you've done, you know, some things not everybody has the chance to do in terms of, you know, I don't know, treatment and testing or whatnot. I'll let you share all that later. So I thought people would be interested to hear about that. And just generally, I find you to be a breath of sunshine and fresh air in this community. Even your emails leave me smiling, and it just kind of makes my day. You just, I don't know, you seem like such an amazing person. So I thought this is more of the energy that we need in this community. So yeah, that's why I wanted you here today. So thank you so much for doing this.
Putting my best face forward. It's not always been smiling, but it's good. Yeah, it is more often than not. That's a good thing.
Yeah, good point. I'm sure it doesn't always feel that way, but I think it's a really incredible trait to have, that you can still put that out there into the world despite going through some, I'm sure, what are some pretty hellish things. And no pressure. Now I've just set the bar really high. Like, you have to be like really awesome during this chat. And
I'll do some juggling if we need to. Got my,
yeah. Okay, so as always, I just start off with telling people, like, how did this start for you? What did this look like? Or, what was life like for you before this all kind of started, your health challenges started?
Okay, so this came out just like a shock bolt out of the blue for me. I say that in hindsight, there are the telltale signs along the way, and some of the other interviews, I'm like, yep, to be honest, I think Liz C had put it one way. She goes, yeah, these signs just went whipping by, these warning signs, it just went by. But prior to getting sick, I was super active. My wife and I are both really athletic and active. We surf a lot, swim. I love running, love the runner's high, hiking, all this stuff. And in my time in Hawaii, since being here, I've lived here longer than any other place in my life. And in the early years being here, that was my lifestyle. It was kind of what you would imagine, more time in the water, as much time in the water as I could. And then as work, I work as an urban planner. So as I started doing more and more work, it started becoming more and more dominant in controlling my agenda, and I let it become so. And for the 5 years leading up to my getting sick, the pace of work, the quantity of work, the amount of hours that I was spending in the office doing things, when I have described it to people, it really sounds exaggerated, but 12-hour days pretty standard, 14, 16-hour days completely common. Working the weekends, blowing off holidays. It was a lot of project-driven stuff, and it was just constant. So it became especially acute in so the good stuff is, all of the right before I got sick, I thought I was the picture of health. I'm 53 this year. I was 50, so 2019, so 52 when I got sick, and I thought, yeah, I feel really good for a 52-year-old, or even never felt that age at all. And one thing I say now is, young and indestructible is when you're young. And then after a while, you really got to start kind of getting your beauty rest and eating your Wheaties and everything. So leading up the year and a half, 2 years before I got sick, the pace of work had really just increased to a pretty insane level. And I look at sleep deprivation as being a cause, just the stress. Became really programmed with this sort of reactionary mode. And one of the early indicators was I generally am I always thought pretty laid back, and definitely not someone that brings the hammer down on people. I don't lose my cool, don't blow up and get angry. And so that year prior to getting sick, I found myself snapping a lot, getting like, having these like emotional outbursts of just being, like stressed. And then, but, just kind of powered on through it. Well, when that happened, I was like, hey, this is not good. I gotta, something has to change. But that was an indication for me of lifestyle needed adjustment. I needed to spend more time on balance and on, getting back out in the water, the saltwater reset that I wasn't doing enough of. But health-wise, I didn't feel that I was heading for anything. Of course, I'd never even heard of CFS. That was, if I had even the remotest concept like something like this could exist in the world, I would have changed my ways sooner, I like to think. But I didn't start trying to really make an earnest effort in getting some more balance in my life until the end of 2018. And I was like, okay, new year, 2019, that's it. I'm not working on the weekends. I'm going to get out and surf, a couple times a week. I'm going to, so all these things, there were these absolutes. And but at the same time, my immune system must have been just hammered, because all through that fall of 2018 and early 2019, I was getting just a series, one cold after another, really bad. Just you know, and it's, you just soldier on through it at work. You know, it's just, okay, I'm sick. Maybe I won't go in for one day, but I'm, you know, snuffling and being sick and sharing the germs for, you know, the next 5 days of the week, 6 days a week. So anyway, so that persisted into January, and in March, I remember, or January, February, and I remember March 2019, March 8th. I was still kind of recovering from a really bad sickness, cold. Had been having these kind of tension headaches, and feeling pretty beat down, you know, just physically feeling pretty run down. But I was still, you know, still putting in a lot of hours at work, still trying to go run, still trying to go to the gym, trying to do it all. And that night I just had this, woke up in the middle of the night with this thunderclap headache, and heart palpitations, and paresthesias, you know, these nerve sensations running down the arms. And from that day forward, sleep was just completely turned on its head. So prior to that, you know, I would sleep soundly through the night. I never had any sleep issues. Wasn't on any medications. Never had issues with mood or recovery. You know, other than having this whole series of colds leading up to this. Again, in hindsight. And so it was like March 8th, have this event. From then on, I was just this wreck. And I was so that's kind of the before and then the moment of. So for me, it was a sudden onset, and starting the next day, I was still able to exercise, or at least I thought I was. I could still get up and do it. But it took a while for me to make the connection that the exercise was just wiping me out. And so the fatigue aspect of this didn't really hit. That was a little bit slower evolution. I was getting post-exertional malaise, and I finally looked that up. I found that term on the internet after, like, what the heck, you know, now I'm noticing when I exercise, I feel like absolute hell the next day. But I wasn't getting the profound fatigue where I couldn't lift my limbs that some people experience. It was more feeling like poison in my veins, feeling like paresthesias, you know, just feeling ill. I definitely did not feel like doing more exercise after that. So that's kind of a long-winded way. So that's the before, during, and starting to get into it. But yeah, before, picture of health, afterwards, basket case. And then it was like, something is acutely wrong. How do you figure out what it is? And I did what everybody seems to do, which is go get frustrated in the typical medical system.
All right. So symptom-wise, how did this progress for you? Did it keep getting worse or kind of off? What did it look like for you kind of when it was at its worst?
So at its worst was probably, there were probably 2 periods where I'd say it really got bad. The first was those first 4 months or so. And there's one component, well, I guess I can get into that later. So for those first few months, the 2 things that I've always relied on for recovery, one is sleep, and the other is exercise, or just being, you know, doing something physically active and fun. And sleep, I had these, it was really frightening. It was these like thunderclap headaches that would wake up, and it started happening for the first couple of weeks after March 8th, where as soon as I would drift off, I would just be about to sleep, I would get this like incredible adrenaline surge, sometimes accompanied with this what sounded like just a big thunderclap in my head, and I'd be wide awake, heart palpitating, you know, and it would go into that cycle. So eventually, after about 3 weeks, so the things that I did immediately, like March 8th, this hits, March 9th, I was like, no caffeine. What all did I cut out? No caffeine, no alcohol. And then within a couple of weeks after that, I was like, just cut out sugar. And I was a heavy duty coffee drinker up to that point. Light on the booze, wine and beer occasionally, you know, a couple times a week, sort of drinking, but all that just cold turkey. That certainly helped with the sleep, but it didn't resolve it. So through this whole experience, the sleep disturbance and insomnia has definitely been a pretty much a characteristic of it, even to today. But for those first few weeks or months, it was that really incredibly profound kind of sleep disturbance. It was no rhyme or reason. I saw a neurologist. I went to an infectious disease specialist, the GP, saw 2 neurologists actually. And everything, all the blood work came back perfect. You're a healthy specimen. Your MRIs, your MRAs, your MRVs, your CT scans, your X-rays, everything looks perfect. You look fine. You're healthy. This is all in your head. You know, this is a generalized anxiety disorder was the initial diagnosis. And I was saying, you know, I'm frustrated, sure, and I'm freaked out, like what's going on, but I'd never had that type of, you know, any types of anxiety or depression or anything before this hit. So that was really probably the most troubling symptom, was the sleep disturbance and just that level of frustration and, you know, being very fearful about what the heck's going on and not getting any satisfactory diagnosis or answer. I think the next right in line with that was exercise. So that the doctors kept saying, well, keep exercising, keep your cardio going. And so every time I'd go running, and this is where it became kind of gradual, I was still able to run. The next day I would get these symptom flares. So going back to the second thing was the exercise, and just gradually over time as I would exercise, it took less exertion for me to have a bigger hit of the symptoms. And in those first couple of months, that was where I did have a few episodes of the real profound fatigue where I'd wake up, or even in the afternoon, it just felt like all the energy was completely drained, like lead weights, you know, for muscles. If I lay down, it's like, I can't even think about, I don't want to, not that I didn't want to get up, but I'm just like, I just don't know that if I want to move my muscles right now. And I don't know that I can. So I had a few episodes of that. Fortunately, it kind of sputtered and didn't stick. I don't have any explanation for that. I definitely, since those first, I would say from March to June, July, by June, I started feeling better. I thought, okay, I'm coming out of this. I started sleeping better at night. I did, you know, the thunderclap headaches went away after about a month and a half. But I was still waking up every sleep cycle. I would wake up. So every hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half, I would wake up. Sometimes with an adrenaline surge, and sometimes just with just wake up smoothly and roll right back to sleep smoothly. So but every night it was, you know, going through these cycles of sleep, wake, sleep, wake, sleep, wake. That did start softening out. June, July were pretty good months. August, I was feeling like, hey, you know, I think maybe I'm recovering, feeling a bit better, feeling more energy, sleeping better at night. I had these persistent headaches, or I wouldn't even call them headaches. It wasn't pain. It's just this kind of these vibrations and paresthesias in the head, down the left side of the body primarily, but eventually to all 4 limbs. Really strange neurological sensations. Those started dissipating in July, August. I had this really sweet day. The last day I went surfing was August 2nd, 2019, and went out because I'd had a couple of really good days where I felt good. Oh, tinnitus was the other thing, or tinnitus. That kicked off right with those thunderclap headaches, and that gradually got more progressively. Initially, it would just come and go throughout the day, and then it became constant. So it still presents constantly, but it seems to be resolving a little bit now too. for a while, it got really loud and just continuous throughout the day. And then it would ebb and flow. It was always kind of loud, but then it would get louder. So July, August, it was starting to go away. I remember being out surfing that day, August 2nd, thinking, wow, I'm not hearing any tinnitus. I feel good. I've got my energy. I'm surfing with my wife on this beautiful day. And, got home. The next day, I was in the office talking to the president of our company, just giving him an update saying, yeah, I went surfing yesterday. It was great. I think I've turned a corner. And then it was like 24 hours on the hour from having gone surfing the day before. And the symptoms just went bam, just came back with a vengeance. So, the paresthesias, these twitching in the fingers and in the hands, it was, just very frustrating, of course, total freak out about what the heck is going on. And really launching into this search for answers. By that time, I'd been Googling the heck out of every symptom that I came up with. I had found out about ME/CFS and kept saying, but I don't have that because I don't have the profound fatigue. That's not what I got. The doctors were saying, no, it can't be that. We've seen ME/CFS. It doesn't look like ME/CFS. So, but I'm like, well, what is it with this post-exertional malaise? What else could be going on? No answers. But at the same time, I was still finding, there are a couple of things around that time that I started doing in earnest. One of them was meditating. I also was like, okay, I need a dietary change. Started doing a lot of sleep hygiene. Might be getting ahead on the things that have worked for me, but anyway, so I was trying to do all this stuff to regain my health, because it felt like July, August, I was feeling pretty good. Then August, after that surf session, and into September and into the fall, the symptoms started getting worse again. The sleep, not so much, but feeling the lack of energy, feeling the post-exertional malaise again, the hit after any type of exertion. And this time it started presenting more symptoms in the brain. It was like one of the things also I never really experienced was the brain fog, or cognitive impairment. I did have some bouts with visual distortion, where I'd be looking out at the buildings off of our lanai here, and they would kind of get a little bit fuzzy and blurry. Started reading. I was able to read through all this time, and if I was reading, I've only just this last year started wearing glasses. Part of that was because of this condition, started getting blurry. When I would read, it would get blurry, and sometimes I'd be looking at the page and it would just like get fuzzed out, and then it would come back into focus. It was the strangest thing. I'd be like, okay, something's going on. It almost felt like a little bit of a electrical vibration going on. So there are just this whole array of really strange neurological type of symptoms that were becoming more and more troubling as we went into fall and into the winter. This would have been a year ago. And again, the doctors here, absolutely no idea what was going on. Once they ruled out the MRI with MRI and MRA and MRV that I was fine, they just said, we're now looking for unicorns. We have no idea what your situation is. And I started looking really more in earnest for what could I do, just on a day-to-day basis, and then what could I do? Who are the specialists out there? Where could I go? So the two that came up, well, the first thing I did was from Googling, started finding an array of resources. And I would say, just in order, there was a book that I would highly recommend. This was before I got to your book, which was awesome, but it was this one right here. So Everyday Healing by Jeanette Hills Jaffe. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but she may or may not have had ME/CFS. She had something similar, a viral infection, and then a long period of chronic illness. But this one was the first one that said you need to structure your life for a healing regimen, because something, you need to really rebalance. Look at all the areas of your life that need some attention: diet, sleep, personal connections. So that was kind of a blueprint that she lays out in this 100 days. Each day you focus on a different thing. And one of the great pieces of advice that I took from that, and then it was reinforced later in, a lot of the material that you put out and elsewhere, is how to prepare to deal with doctors, physicians, with tests, with advocating for your health in the medical industry. So she had a lot to say about that was very helpful to prepare for what was coming in this whole investigation, diagnosis odyssey. So the next thing I found was, I think, if I got the sequence right, roughly, was I was thinking, okay, I've got some form of ME/CFS, right? I was thinking that maybe this is something that I have, even though I'm not getting creamed on fatigue. And so I found Dan Neuffer, ANS Rewire. And Dan Neuffer is down in Australia. So I he has an online course about neural retraining, brain retraining. So I jumped onto his course and started putting, first thing was getting through the course, because there's an extensive amount of material. I do highly recommend, if it's something that looks like it might be beneficial. For me, it was very helpful, and some of the takeaways there, probably the big one was, one, you can recover. Believe you can recover. Don't listen to the voices in your head that say you can't recover. This is not permanent. That's been reinforced again and again. But that was one of the first times it was like, don't think that this isn't a resolvable condition. The other thing was, don't symptom focus. Try not to body scan. Those were a couple of takeaways. But his program it's a way. I can go into a little more detail later, I suppose, but it's basically re-examining your behaviors and your reactions to things, interrupting them, and kind of replacing those reactions with a more positive direction or more positive mindset. But I have to say, I didn't stick with that program. I went through the whole thing. I started doing it. The symptoms to me were just got too overwhelming at the time. And I was just very frustrated with just the lack of answers and the lack of finding somebody who would give me more than 5 minutes at a time or 10 minutes at a time. And all of the doctors I was seeing here, they were pretty much directing me to, you should go see a psychiatrist. You really, this is purely a like, it's all in your head type of a condition. And by that time, one other symptom that I experienced in those first 3 months that I think is pretty common was anxiety. Like what I now understand is anxiety. And I have absolute, bottomless sea of empathy for people who live with that on a regular basis. Because I had this episode I'd never experienced before. When it hit, it was like, wow, the world is coming down. The world is crashing in. What if I don't see my parents ever again? What if I don't get back to the mainland? Just these ridiculous, irrational thoughts were popping in. That lasted for about those first 3 months, and then slowly went away. And I haven't had to deal with that type of that experience. But the problem was, when I was going in and explaining that to the physicians early on as one of the many things I was experiencing, that's all they latched onto. So the blood work comes back clear, MRI comes back clear. This, I'm saying, look, I'm stressed out at work. It's stressful there. I'm having these thoughts about that I recognize, and I can distance myself from them, that to me are irrational worries. That's a new thing. That's something I haven't experienced. So I guess I can understand where they would deduce that it's, it's all in your head, or it's in that psychological realm. But I kept saying, no, there's got to be more going on here. There has to be something else that's happening. And that's where I'd run into a dead end. So where all that kind of came back for me is going into the winter of 2019, 2020. I realized I really needed to try to find an expert or somebody who is like a specialist in this field. Still wasn't entirely convinced, probably, out of hope that it wasn't ME/CFS, because as everybody else who first encounters it probably sees, it's, or at least until some of the material you've been putting out, it's a grim story. It's not a diagnosis anybody wants. But I was like, okay, I'm going to go to either I looked at all the people who specialize in ME/CFS. So the Center for Complex Diseases was one. I'm blanking on some of them now, but down in Florida, Dr. Klimas in Florida, and then the clinic in Utah, the Bates, or the Bateman home. And so Florida and Utah, they weren't keeping, or they weren't taking new patients. The Center for Complex Diseases, I made contact there and set up an appointment for, I think, February. And then also found out that fortunately my insurance would cover a trip to the Mayo Clinic. So I was like, well, shoot, okay, Mayo Clinic they're pretty good, I hear. I'm going to go to the Mayo Clinic, So that was where I decided, let me put that in motion and see if I can get a diagnosis at the Mayo Clinic. My GP here was like, yes, do that, please do that. Anywhere but my office at this point.
Get out of my office.
Yeah, he was like fed up. So it's kind of like, there's nothing more we can do for you here. Yes, go to the specialist, see what they can do. I had a couple of people that I know here who had gone to the Mayo Clinic for different conditions, and just sang the highest praises and said, yeah, you'll be in good hands. So there was kind of this decision point between those two clinics. One that my insurance doesn't cover, the Center for Complex Diseases, one that it did. And so I ended up deciding to go to the Mayo Clinic. I thought, just get the full workup, and see what they can tell me, see where it can go.
Yeah, that was one of the many reasons I was excited to talk to you, because you're actually the only person I know of who has gone to the Mayo Clinic. I'm sure many people have. I'm just not personally in contact with them, but it does have such a good reputation. And I know a lot of people out there don't have the opportunity to go there, whether it be they live in another country or finances or whatever. So yeah, whatever you're able or comfortable sharing about that experience, I think people would find very interesting. How did it go?
Absolutely. So that was the first time I think the first time I contacted you was when I was at the Mayo Clinic, and I think I had just gotten my diagnosis. And to back up a little bit before that, I flashed that one book up, and then the ANS Rewire, and then the next thing that was a real change or a real milestone that gave me hope and also gave me some direction was your book. So I found Finding Freedom sometime in the fall of that year of 2019, I think, and ordered it, read it, was completely relieved that there was somebody who gotten through it, that it was it's just this very hopeful kind of just a very hopeful message. And then also here are the things that you did in a disciplined way that helped you get through it. So that was kind of the first, or maybe the second way that I was trying to structure some kind of a healing plan for myself in the absence of anything from the doctors here. The other care that I saw.
I just want to throw in, just to take a moment, just say, it's really, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's just so nice for me to hear, obviously, because that was absolutely my goal and my hope with putting it out there. Not that it's going to cure everybody else, but just to see that some people do get past it, and perhaps something that worked for me will work for other people. So yeah, thanks for taking a chance on, a nobody author and investing in my book.
Oh, absolutely. I was, I devoured it right away. I mean, it was like page burning through it, and then went back and reread it. And I was looking for my copy of it. It's here somewhere because I brought this other stack of books I was going to recommend. But it's well underlined, noted, dog-eared, tabs, the whole thing. So it was kind of my roadmap to get a sort of a daily life plan at least started. I was going to say and also I was kind of feeling like at a certain point, because there is, in addition to that, the other thing that this disease did, and I'll get to all the silver linings of this disease for me later, but I don't know if this is the silver lining or not, but one of the other things that it did is it finally compelled me to get onto social media, which I have studiously avoided for my entire adult life. I just look over my wife's shoulder on her Facebook page, and that was it. But on Instagram, I found your site, or your posts on Instagram, and it was also very inviting. And some of the other just some of the references you posted, but also you were very accessible. And I didn't jump right on that until I think I was in Rochester, Minnesota at the Mayo Clinic. I was like, it's time to like really come out of my shell a little bit and try to connect with people who are familiar with this. The one other thing I was going to say before that, just leading up to the Mayo Clinic, because it's part of the story there, is one of the other. So when I was here in Hawaii, very frustrated with not finding answers, and I will say, I was pretty critical of the medical professionals who helped me out here, just because I didn't feel they were listening. Felt that I had my 5-minute or 10-minute slot, and that was it. But I do want to say, I mean, they're all fantastic, and I know they were as frustrated as I was in not knowing what was going on, and with just all the pressures of working against the the insurance hoops that they have to go through on their side, and the allotment of patients that they have, and just the whole issue of access is a real critical problem, I think, in our healthcare in the States, at least. We have pretty quick access, but as far as how much time they have to devote to really figuring out the tricky stuff, it's just not there. So I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I noticed that a lot of us get frustrated, understandably, with the medical system, and even angry, and just really not in a good place. And of course, like every profession, there's good doctors and not so good doctors, but I can't imagine what it's like also being them in their shoes, because all they have is the knowledge that they have, and it really seems like virtually no one on this planet has all the information for ME/CFS, or how to diagnose it or treat it properly. And we come in with cognitive symptoms like depression and anxiety. I think most of us recognize, at least as the people I talk to, those symptoms come later. So none of us really feel like the anxiety or the depression caused the illness for us. But I can see how it would present that way. So yeah, I always think like, I don't want to. There's so many doctors out there doing really great work, and I don't want to be bashing them or shaming them. For me, it's not about that. I think most are really good people, and they're doing their best, but they can only work with what they've got and what they know. And
it's helpful to keep that in mind too, just if for no other reason, just to curb your own frustration. It's like, none of them would want this kind of a condition. If they could figure out how to fix it, they would in a heartbeat, for sure. So saying that, I'm kind of wanted to make that point. And also, there was a lot of frustration and a lot of lack of answers that could have led to a lot more frustration. To me, it directed me then to, all right, what are the alternatives? Alternative healing, naturopathic healing. So I did start seeing a naturopathic doctor who is really fantastic. And some of the things that she did that the other doctors didn't, she immediately tested for Epstein-Barr virus. She tested for tick-borne diseases, and she tested for a couple of other things. Those two were relevant because not knowing that I had Epstein-Barr virus, but I guess 95% of us do, my numbers were off the charts. I'd had a reactivation or an activation of it. So that was right. She took that test right in the peak of the symptoms. Well, let's see, I started seeing her pretty quickly because I was already having frustrating time getting just in to see a doctor right early on. So she tested, I think, about maybe 6 weeks rather into, this must have been in April when I had the EBV test. And she said, wow, this came back way off the charts. Also, your vitamin B levels are below normal where they should be. And by the way, you have a lot of arsenic in your system. So it's like all this weird stuff. When she said arsenic, I was looking sideways at my wife, who's a big Agatha Christie fan. But subsequent tests showed it was all in normal range and stuff. But so Epstein-Barr, which I've done a lot of reading on, and it's a real pernicious little bugger. So that was active, and that stayed, or that actually dissipated. I had continued testing all the way through the end of 2019. By the end of 2019, all the levels were back below, below normal. I mean, below, they were where they should have been. But it was off the scale at the first blood test. So I clearly had a big mess there. When I shared that with my GP, he just said, well, so what? Nothing we can do about it. And I was like, okay, well, that maybe not, but that at least explains that it might be something more going on than just me being anxious about stuff.
Yeah.
So that, and then she also did detect antibodies for a tick-borne bacteria called Ehrlichia, and a couple of the bands on the Western blot test for Lyme. 3 of 10 bands were positive. So I just throw that out there. People are experiencing these things. I had a couple of people subsequent me, people on Instagram who just said, hey, recommended that I really go check out the Lyme aspect of this, that I might have Lyme disease or a tick-borne disease. So I took that with me. This is going back to Mayo Clinic now. The one thing that I thought hadn't been investigated enough here was the infectious disease aspect of it. The tick-borne disease, I still didn't know enough about EBV. I know that there isn't really a cure for it, that it flares up and that it presents and is often a trigger for ME/CFS. It's often correlated with it. But I didn't know absolutely there was nothing you could do about it. But I was thinking that my doctors here didn't really explore that aspect of it as a trigger, or that something might still be going on in my system and stressing my system out. But I did take that knowledge with me in those blood tests to the Mayo Clinic. And if I have, I shouldn't lead with the criticism, but that was my one bummer experience with the Mayo Clinic, is they were uninterested in that. Absolutely. They didn't want to pursue it, investigating the infectious disease aspect. Bummer. What they did do was so the experience there basically is you apply to be accepted as a patient. They ask you to list your top symptoms that you're concerned with, and then all the usual sort of background. And then they assign a kind of an overseeing doctor. In my case, it was an internist who was overseeing my case study. And then they basically assemble every specialist that they think is applicable to your condition. And they anticipate, if you're coming from out of state, with most people are, or out of the country, they recommend that you plan to be there for 10 to 14 days. And what I ended up doing is just kind of a small world story, is a woman that I knew from Hawaii, who was originally from Minnesota. Her husband's from Hawaii, but they relocated to Rochester, Minnesota. So they run a small Airbnb called Viola Suites. If anybody ever needs to go there, I highly recommend it. That's my other plug, because they're awesome people. It's about 2.5 miles from the clinic, and Rochester is small town, relatively speaking. So it doesn't take long to get out in the countryside. So as far as a visit, it wasn't exactly the vacation destination that we would have thought to take, but we made the most of it. So my wife and I went out, we went in February, planned for 2 weeks. She could only stay for about a week, so she flew back early. This is right at the beginning of COVID. So COVID was starting to be a little bit of a rumble when we left. We weren't wearing masks on the plane when we left, but on the flight back, everybody was wearing masks, and things were starting to get serious, but it hadn't been. I think while we were there is when it was termed the pandemic, and a lot of the protocols started going into place. But while we were there at the Mayo Clinic, where they were absolutely fantastic. One is the attitude of care and the sincerity of care and being concerned for the patient just permeates the place. And all the people that we met, they were fantastic. They were very, everything was very efficient, was very concentrated. It's almost like signing up for classes at college. You go through and you get all your class assignments for the week, and then it's like clockwork. You just hit from one specialist to the next. You have a couple of appointments each day. You do your lab work early on. Then they review it with you later in the week. So it's a very impressive operation. It's a very efficient, reassuring type of a setting, I would say. So all that are all good things. The specialist that they directed me to, and I was already suggesting to the doctor that ME/CFS was one of the things that I was wondering about, and that ended up being my diagnosis. Before he came to that diagnosis, the specialists I saw included, a neurologist. They did send me to the psychologist. I saw 2 integrative doctors, the sleep doctor, the internist for sure. And the one thing where I thought it was kind of an off note is he had me do a stress test, like a treadmill running stress test. So the reason that he explained to me later, and so I did the stress test, and I was actually feeling pretty good while I was there, relatively speaking. I was, still had the paresthesias and had the symptoms, but it was they were kind of on an ebb when I was there for the first few days. So I did the stress test, felt great. I love running. That's the first time I had run and exercised my legs and my lungs in a while. 12 minutes on the treadmill, just banged it out. Was like, wow, that's fantastic. Maybe I am getting better. This is great. 24 hours later, still felt okay. Well, I still had the baseline symptoms, but I didn't feel so bad. I was like, what the heck? Maybe it's this cold Rochester air. It's this nice and it was, snow on the ground. It was real bracing and everything. 36 hours later, bam, I just got nailed with the symptoms again. And this time it was the muscle fatigue, full-on expression of the symptoms of that poison in the vein feeling, the pinprick sensations, all that stuff through the limbs. Major frustration. So I did the stress test, on I think it was on a Thursday. I saw the doctor on a Friday. He said, okay, your tests look great. How do you feel? I said, I feel pretty good. He goes, so I just wanted to prove to you that, physically you're fine. Physically, I don't, he goes, I still may have a diagnosis of ME/CFS, but physically you're fine. And so we think that these are really somatic conditions. That doesn't mean they're in your head. It means physiologically things may have happened because of the chronic stress of, sleep deprivation, chronic stress over the years that triggered this event. But, and so the overarching diagnosis on top of ME/CFS though was centralized sensitization syndrome, which is a real broad umbrella term. If you look it up, it covers a whole host of things. The shorthand version is like a civilian PTSD. It's where you've just been you know, your ANS system has been ramped up for so long on fight or flight that it never ratchets back down, that the stimulation is just, you know, just lights up like Christmas whenever you have a little bit of stimulation, or it never quite gets back into the rest and digest mode. So within that, so that was the framework in which ME/CFS is placed. And so the solution for getting out of the ME/CFS, he was trying to, I think, make the distinction that the physically I'm fine. Physically, there's nothing wrong with me. I should be able to get out and run a marathon. Actually, that's not true, but I could get out and jog a few miles without any impact. And that I really need to work on dialing, you know, rebooting the brain into rest and digest. So calming the nervous system down in whatever way I could, de-stressing at work, meditation. I was directed to the integrative doctors, and there were two sessions, or two kind of directions there. One of them was, I really appreciated and really enjoyed this one doctor. She prescribed, bump, bump, bump. I got all my props here. Forest bathing, spending time with the tree. So this was a really good book. This was one that I found myself, but it was a good one. She said, her prescription was 10 minutes with the tree every day and an hour on the weekends without fail. Do that for a year. Come back and see me. So I've been not 100% disciplined on that, but I have to say, whatever the healing properties of trees may be, I always feel better. Right, hot rod out there. I always feel better when I spend time with the tree or get out there on the trail, or can spend that time of just kicking back in that way. So let's see, the other thing that with the Mayo Clinic that was frustrating too, because by this time I was doing a lot more reading on ME/CFS, had heard about the PACE trials, read up about that while I was at the Mayo Clinic. I had not encountered that prior to being in the Mayo Clinic, and then I started reading. I was like, I should have done this before. Mayo Clinic ME/CFS, and then just found this whole wealth of information that was pretty critical of the Mayo Clinic's approach to ME/CFS. And along with my diagnosis, the prescription was GET and CBT. So graduated exercise training and cognitive behavior therapy.
That's what came out of the Mayo Clinic?
That's what came out of the Mayo Clinic in February. And then they recommended going to a class that's really developed for fibromyalgia more than ME/CFS, but they did have some ME/CFS patients, or other people with ME/CFS that were taking this class, and it was a 2-day course on essentially adjusting your lifestyle to adapt to having ME/CFS, and then rebalancing. So it's their own little framework, but very similar to the types of things that's out there about more integrative approach to a healthy lifestyle. So in theirs, it was a pie chart of 14 different pie slices, and each one, you're supposed to give attention to. So diet, relationships, exercise, spirituality. Yeah, I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. 14 was a little bit much to digest all at one time, right? And then they did talk about biofeedback, especially for people who are dealing with chronic pain, with fibromyalgia or with other forms of chronic pain who are in that course. And I would say the best thing that I got out of that particular experience were meeting the other patients in there and meeting, hearing their experiences, finding out what's worked for them and what hasn't worked. There's some pretty remarkable people that found themselves there, and a few of which I'm still in touch with. Not all the people in the course, but that I've still been in touch with. And at the end of those 2 days, got a big old stack of DVDs and brochures about meditation and whatnot. And then it was kind of like, okay, go find your CBT therapist and get started. And that's kind of where the handoff is. So the way Mayo Clinic kind of hands off at the end of it, they, obviously that's not the primary care provider. So what they do is they'll hand off their diagnosis. They're fantastic with providing additional support to your GP back home, but they basically try to give you all the information you need to hand off their diagnosis and their recommendations to your general practitioner, and then having them set up any specialists that you need to see based on their recommendations. The other outcome that, at least to me, was beneficial, that I appreciated getting, was from the psychologist or psychiatrist, I think, that reviewed my, interviewed me and reviewed my work. They just said, you do not have generalized anxiety disorder. You don't have, you're not depressed. You don't have any of those conditions that were indicated on your medical records when you came in here. You just have centralized sensitization syndrome and ME/CFS. So do what you can to calm your nervous system, to dial your central nervous system down. So let's see. Yeah, that's the whole sordid story.
It's interesting to
It's a
hear.
long-winded
Yeah.
one.
No, I appreciate all the detail. That's really fascinating. It's interesting to know what happens when you go to the Mayo Clinic and what that looks like. I'm thinking while you're talking, how their assessment that it's a somatic condition, and I think sometimes some of us take that as an insult because it's such a physical condition for us, and we have so many symptoms, and they're severe, and it's just like there's no. And it sounds insulting, like it's all in your head,
Yeah.
which isn't what that means. But also, I think the flip side of that is that it's exciting, because if my body really is fine, that is incredible news. Like if it really
That's
not just, but if it's an autonomic nervous system thing, or some sort of neurological thing, or my brain is causing some kind of malfunction in symptoms in my body, it feels, I don't know, more manageable than every organ is broken and I've got all these things that aren't working. And
yeah, absolutely. And that's I'm appreciating your that positive view of it, because it was really easy to kind of come back from that experience and think, okay, what did I really learn, and what did I get out of that? Because for me, it was a huge investment of time, and this commitment is, I was like, wow, time and money, to do it all. But of course, my attitude is right now, whatever it takes to get well, whatever I, within what the resources allow. But there was a little bit of frustration about not investigating the, things that I thought were important at the time, the infectious diseases aspect, and thinking somatic, but being told physically that your body is okay, that, there's something that needs to be rebalanced, in terms of work life, or in terms of your life, or in terms of your ANS system. But and that's no small feat, but at the very least, there is the reassurance that the system is not completely collapsing or falling apart. Then again, I don't know.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, to me, it applies also that recovery can be faster than maybe what we think it is. Because if it feels like head to toe you're broken, I don't like to use that. I shouldn't use that term because we're clearly not broken. But if you know what I mean, though, like it feels like our whole body is just gone to crap. That's a big fix. Whereas the somatic part, it feels like something you can turn around a little bit faster. It's really interesting that they sent. I actually just did a video about this recently. I haven't posted it yet. Maybe by the time of this one being up, the other one will be up. But I have, it doesn't sit well with me that whether it's the Mayo Clinic or different committees or whoever it is in the world, putting out these blanket one-size-fits-all treatment approaches for people, because it doesn't seem like that's the way out of it. Or Because I definitely know people who GET and CBT have helped, but there's also a lot who they haven't. So it's a bit concerning that I don't know that everyone's sent off with that plan, but it kind of sounds like that's what happens. If you get the ME/CFS diagnosis, you're going to be sent off with that. So what did you think of that recommendation that they sent you off with?
So for me, I'm still trying to work a graded exercise therapy of some sort. And part of that was really modeled from your experience in your book. And I'm doing, I think, what everybody has to do, which is the trial and error to see how far you can go without crashing or without having a flare up. And since coming back from the Mayo Clinic, so since February, I guess, the last 9 months, 8 or 9 months, my trajectory has been like this. And I keep thinking about Liz C's, graph of her recovery, which is, that big spaghetti splotch, on the XY coordinate. And that's kind of what it feels like. I've had, a few weeks where things seem to be really progressing and, the symptoms are really abated to a great degree. I've never had a day without the symptoms presenting. The tinnitus has been constant, but it's for the most part now I ignore it, and then I'll think, oh, can I hear it? Yeah, there it is. It's still there. But it seems as though the health trajectory is going in the right direction. Overall, it seems that that's the case with me now, which is I'm very thankful for. Incredibly thankful for. And then less and less so now when I do have the flares. They still come in ways that are out of the blue and frustrating. Usually I can link it back to something, some trigger, some, either overexertion or work. And I know we'll get to talk about that. But they're few and further between, and they're getting less acute as they go on. So I think for me, the GET, and I haven't looked up a cognitive behavior therapist. I was seeing a psychiatrist and a counselor for a while, which I recommend people speak with counselors or therapists, or they can just be a godsend for a outside perspective. At the softest pedal is, it's a third party person who will listen to you bitch and moan and complain and give you a little slap upside the head and some perspective. So, and on the deeper end of it is, they can get to some things that really need some attention and that you may not be paying attention to.
So I know another one of the reasons that I was hoping to have this chat with you today is because people ask a lot. It's a big decision to make, because lots of people are in that sort of range like you are, where they can still function, they can still work, or they can still go to school, but it's incredibly difficult, and they're struggling to find the energy or the, whatever it is, the space to devote to their recovery. And people write me and ask me, should I quit university or should I quit my job? And of course, I don't know what the answer is for anybody else, but I know that you have had a big decision around this lately when it comes to your job. So
I worked pretty much full time since the onset of the condition. Work was, in my opinion, was definitely a contributing factor. Just the amount of work, the workload, and the stressors at work. So I will say that the company I work for has been incredibly supportive. My philosophy was to be very, and this may be a luxury that other people don't have, but it was to be full disclosure about what I was going through with my bosses and my colleagues. And they've been just fantastic. But one of the things I've realized is, at least for me, I've made the decision that it's not just a decision. I believe in my heart of hearts, while I've made some progress on recovery, that I'm not going to recover fully until I take 100% kind of focus on doing so. And fortunately, I have some resources to do that. Both my wife and I work right now, so it's going to put a little more burden on her for a little bit, but we have some savings that we're going to rely on. I thought about a couple of the other interviews you had, Liz C, for instance, when she said, man, I blew through all my savings and stuff pursuing this before I made a hard decision. That really resonated with me because definitely have spent a lot of just ridiculous out of pocket, on trying to find recovery and doing that, tons of supplements and looking at all these different things. So I think doing kind of a planned, concerted effort to focus on recovery. So for me, the decision I made recently, and while I'm still working right now, I'm still trying to decide when exactly to depart, because my first thought was to leave at the end of the year. And then I'm also contemplating, or there is a project I'm working on that I really want to finish, have a feeling of responsibility to finish, and I think I have the wherewithal to finish it. So I may continue on into the completion of that project. And then again, with the full disclosure to my bosses and my colleagues, is when that's done, that I'm planning to take some time off. That may happen sooner too, because the other thing that the other question I often ask myself is, in 6 months from now, what regrets do I want to avoid? And I do believe that if I had taken time off earlier or at certain stages of this condition and focused on it, I'd be further along in the recovery. So my experience has been a little bit of the reality of, resources are a concern, money is a concern, health insurance is a concern. So at what point do I, start drawing down from savings rather than seeing a, continued in stream, and then sort of taking the gamble that if I do that within a certain amount of time, I'll be able to make a lot of progress on healing. For me, the decision is I need to make that. I need to take that time to do that. Health is everything. So it's a very personal decision. I'll segue a little bit into one of the ways that decision has been aided is with some coaching. And I mentioned Pamela Rose earlier. She's fantastic, man, awesome. She also has not advised me in one way or the other. She's very careful. This is a personal decision that you have to make. She's referenced some very positive experiences with others who have taken this path. And this also kind of this touches on a lot of things. It touches on mindset, and it touches on the opportunity that the disease presents. The mindset is one, for me, that there's a little bit of a silver lining in this, in that my life was really out of balance before this, in terms of the amount of time I devoted to work versus family, friends, the ocean, doing things that I love to do and keeping things in balance. Versus, this is an opportunity to course correct, and it's the kind of opportunity that you can't. It's the offer you can't refuse, right? I have no choice. My life and my health depends on it. So that's where the realization I've come to, and what's kind of taking me so long to get there. One is fear. It's a frightening thing to leave. That kind of security. And two is making plans for it. Just figuring out what's the best program you can come up with and plan you can come up with to make it the most successful outcome possible. And then after that, you got to just suspend the fear. So for me, I'll throw out this too. I'm a wayward Lutheran. I was raised in the Lutheran church, and so this has also been a way for me. One of the things that in the ANS Rewire that Dan Neuffer said is, you have to be able to cast a little bit of your fate to a higher power. And he goes, and if whatever your faith is, to be able to surrender a little bit of your own sense of control of where you're headed, and not just grip onto it fearfully. So for me, I've leaned back on my my beliefs to do that, and just like, all right, I'm going into the big unknown, and going to take it where it leads. That's the spiritual side. The practical side is, I don't feel that I have a choice. I don't feel that I will recover unless I do this. And so it took a while to align the resources to make that plan a reality. And that's the path I think I need to go down. So
I think that was such a good question, Jim, that you posed or that you mentioned earlier about when trying to make this decision. Where do I want to be in 6 months? Like, picture 6 months from now, the trajectory that I'm on. Where am I going to be in 6 months if I keep doing exactly what I'm doing? And I know that for me, when I was working, even though I was working mostly from home, I was never going to get better. I just didn't have the energy. You know, maybe some people can, we're all different, but you know, looking at your own trajectory where you're on in like 6 months, do I want to be in the same place I am right now?
but if you think about going from 16-hour days or 12-hour days to 8-hour days, and then how much there's a double edge there too, which is, or not a double edge. So the idea of being able to really focus on healing and just being chill and not having the bombardment of those stressors sounds fantastic. There's also one of the interviewers, I don't recall if it was Jason or somebody else who had mentioned doing nothing all day is not healing for him, and for me too. I don't think I'm wired that way. So you know, finding some way to both be, you know, focusing on healing and then also having a purpose and a way to spend the time it productively or creatively. That's another aspect of it that I've been really thinking about. How do I want to spend that time and fill that time? But at 6 months from now, I certainly, as you're kind of implying, I don't want to look back and think, man, I really should have pulled the plug 6 months ago, because I still am stuck in the same health condition that I was in before.
So it sounds like there's been, I mean, quite a few things that have helped you. You really got on this fast, which is inspiring and nice to see. And, you know, things you mentioned, like right off the bat, it sounded like you made some lifestyle changes and started meditating and cut out sugar and alcohol and caffeine. And then you found some really good books that helped you to structure and did some brain training and, you know, sought out some clinics and some coaching and some counseling. You know, does that kind of sum up the things that have helped you so far? Are we missing some things? Because of course, everyone's journey is different, but it's always nice to hear, you know, what works for people and what doesn't.
So another thing that that you've hammered home quite a bit: sleep at all costs, sleep hygiene. So, and I found that the circadian rhythm is you can get back to it. So I'm naturally just getting to sleep by 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I'm naturally waking up with the sunrise. And I don't fight it. I don't say, oh, but I just want to hug the pillow a little longer. You know, no matter how crappy I feel, I just get up and within 15 minutes. And again, fortunately, I'm my condition is not so severe that I can get up out of bed and stand on my feet and walk the 20 feet from the bedroom to the lanai or to the outdoors and stare out the lanai or stare out a window. But sleep hygiene has been huge. For diet, here's another thing I took away from Vera Wilhelmsson, I think her name is.
You've seen all the interviews.
Oh, geez, are you kidding? That's like, I'm like getting so much inspiration there. But that gal is a pistol, man. She's on fire. But Ayurveda. So I have a friend here who's really into Ayurvedic practices, and so I consulted with her, and she made some diet recommendations and things that I jumped on right away. So that because one of the other things that they detected was candida. So candida is pretty much gone, or it is gone now. But one of the things that stabilized my gut was Ayurvedic khichdi, vegetarian kind of approach. I eat meat too. I'm still omnivorous, but so that was helpful. Journaling. I'm just a totally avid journaler about anything and everything under the sun. So that's been really helpful. Just to offload things as well as to get creative. You know, fill it with drawings if the mood strikes, just to get my head out of symptoms and things like that. That's been helpful.
I think it's so powerful, and I think it flies under the radar. I don't think people give journaling enough credit. There are so many successful people, you know, throughout history that have used journaling just to really help them get through all sorts of things. And for me, it's also been insanely helpful. I've actually recently done a video on that one as well, which may or not be up may
Oh,
or may not be
I was
up
gonna
at the
say I
time of
haven't
this
seen
one
that one.
airing, but yeah. Yeah, I've got so many videos and so many ideas. I just can't keep up with the editing. But yeah, because for me, journaling has been huge. So just throwing out some different journaling techniques. But
Journaling
yeah, I'm glad you
was
brought that one
helpful.
up.
That's another one that's good in hindsight because I've kept a journal since, God, I don't know, since I think the earliest one that I found is 7th grade, but I didn't keep it up since then. But anyways, going back through my whole career as a professional, all my time in Hawaii, I've kept a journal. And going back through that, I part of my healing journey since it started is I went back and read all these old journals, and incredibly helpful just to see, hey, there's some patterns here of things that that I want to change. And this whole brain, like DNRS, is what I've been really disciplined about doing now. I know Lizzie mentioned that. That's a neural rewiring kind of brain retraining process. And one of the things that you do with that is identify thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. There's the inventory of just ways that you are, of your thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. And you examine what's actually serving you and what's not. And so looking back at those old journals, I was seeing, one of the things was this growing amount of criticism and sort of negative kind of off gassing into the journal. And I was like, man, there's this period where it's not there at all. And then slowly it kind of winds its way in. And so it's made me certainly go back and look at reactions to things and think, whoa, now I can see it. I can identify it and nip it at the bud. And just, I'm kind of trying to dial myself back to my kinder, gentler version of peace, love, and unity. So journaling is awesome. It's good from that historical review as well as just on a moment by moment, day to day kind of thing. So I highly recommend that.
Wow. Okay, that was a lot. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. That was really, really
Sorry about
helpful.
that. I must have needed to
No,
get stuff off my chest.
no apologies needed. It's so much to sum up, isn't it? Like it's such a journey and there's so much going on. It's really hard. And I'm sure this is just, the tip of the iceberg and you'll be remembering things after that you didn't mention or things that you only touched on that you could have said a lot more about. But I think it's really, really helpful, really great. I really appreciate you sharing all of this, Jim. Seriously, thank you. Thank you very much. This is, yeah,
Thanks for
really
taking
great
the
to hear.
time again.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
it's absolutely my pleasure. It's nice to see the way you're attacking all this. It's really impressive, all the research you're doing, all the people you're connecting with, and yeah,
It's a little
yeah, I'm happy
spastic.
for.
That was one of Pamela's cautions was, you might want to just try one or two things rather than going for the whole spread. But
That is the risk, isn't it? I'm the same because I want to try it all. If I hear about 18 things that help people, I'm like, well, there's no time to waste. We must do all 18.
yeah,
Which isn't always the best approach.
that's why you have to quit work so you have time to try all 18
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm
Yeah.
really excited to see where this takes you. I'm happy that you're on social media a bit now, so I can follow your journey. And if people want to reach you, if they want to follow you on social media, where would they find you?
So I'm only on Instagram, and it's nearfish808.
All right.
So I think I have all of like 9 or 10 posts on there right now since last fall. So I'll try to do better, try to do more.
Well, I'll put the link in the video description. So you're going to get some more followers after this. So now the pressure is on. It's
Yikes.
real.
Okay.
You got to get posting. You'll have, yeah.
I'll work on my etiquette. I will reply if people ping me. I'm still really, I'm not a Luddite or anything. I'm not afraid of technology, but for some reason, Zuckerberg scared the heck out of me, so I stayed away from it forever.
Well, we appreciate that you're on there and sharing that with us. So, yeah, that's it. And for everyone watching, if you enjoyed this or you want to see more interviews, like Jim has mentioned, I should get you to do a summary of all these videos. You seem to know them better than I do, but I've
This
got
is my
quite a bit
tickler
out
page.
there. Yeah. So I'll put a link on the screen here or here. somewhere on the screen with a playlist with a bunch of other interviews I've done, some partial recovery stories like Jim's and a whole bunch of full recovery stories. There's some really inspiring stuff there. So thank you to all of you watching. As always, can't wait to hear your thoughts and your comments, on this video here. And I imagine Jim will be happy to answer any questions if you want to just pose them right on the video here as well. And I always am as well. And thank you again to you, Jim. This has been absolutely, absolutely amazing. And we'll have to stay in touch. And I look forward to seeing how this all progresses for you over the next few months.
Yeah, thanks.
For that 6-month update.
Yeah, I hope to do the recovery video, the fully recovered video one of these days.
Yes,
but,
yes.
Onward,
We will
onward
do a follow-up. Yeah, stay tuned, everyone, because the full recovery video is absolutely coming and soon. So yeah, that's it. Take care, everyone.
All right.
And yeah, I hope you're all doing well.